Welcome to The Favorites, the podcast presented by Bet365. We are part of the Volume Podcast Network. I am Chad Millman, Chief Content Officer of the Action Network. I am joined, as always, by my co-host, my companion, my compadre, my BFF, professional bettor, Simon Hunter. Hello, Simon.
Hello, Chad. My life will never be the same because of the one thing in this world, Gold Zone. I don't know if you experienced the new Gold Zone on NBC Peacock, but I'm addicted. I literally wake up, I turn on a volcano, which I know you don't know what a volcano is, but the young kids know what it is. I go around the apartment, I turn on all the TVs to the same channel, to Gold, put it on, and it's just 10 hours of non-stop action. I'm addicted to it. I can't believe in a week we have to go back to normal life, Chad.
I am so in love with the Gold Zone. It ate up my entire weekend. At one point, my kid walked into the living room when I was watching it, and he goes, "Am I hearing things, or is that Scott Hansen?" And and he goes, and I go, "Dude, Christmas has come early."
Yeah.
Because NBC is so smart. They gave us the Gold Zone with Scott Hansen and also Andrew Siciliano, who I thought, to me, that's who I watched on Red Zone before Scott Hansen. I love Siciliano. He's the fucking best. So to be getting them in Gold Zone, dude, I'm with you 100%. The only thing better than Gold Zone is talking about the NFC North. For today's third installment in our annual NFL Division Preview Series, we discuss the NFC North. We discuss the NFC North, and we are joined by a very special guest. He's a longtime ESPN insider, NFL expert, the recently elected president of the Malik Neighbors fan club, also nearly my neighbor in Central Connecticut. He is Field Yates.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Or I guess good morning, depending on what time people are listening to this podcast. Sorry for being more specific with the time of the day.
I feel an immense
amount of pressure. Yeah. Hey, good day, somebody out there. I feel a ton of pressure because I too am addicted to the Gold Zone, and I too must stand for both Scott Hansen and Andrew Siciliano. And all of a sudden, people are thinking about those two gentlemen, which makes people very excited and makes people feel a certain way that is only sort of normally experienced normally on Sundays from 1 until about 7:30 p.m. Eastern time for 18 glorious Sundays during the year. They've been getting that during the middle of July and August. I feel like I better bring it, or else I'm just going to be an afterthought to those that have been fixated instead on Red Zone and the upcoming season that we have.
The way you set that up just now, how people are feeling certain things for Scott Hansen and Andrew Siciliano, that's how Simon usually sets things up when he is trying to get me and Matt Mitchell, our producer, nervous that he is going to wade into some territory that Matt Mitchell is immediately going to have to start bleeping. So nice job.
You kept it PG on this show, don't you worry. I'll try to do my best to keep it that way the rest of the way.
Exactly. Although if we're talking about the NFC North, it might get ugly because there's going to be a lot of opinions. Me, as a Chicago Bears fan, listeners of the show know.
Yeah.
I'm going to come with some surprising takes on the Bears today based on a lot of the research we've been doing. As a reminder, the Favorites podcast is presented by Bet365. Bet365 doesn't do ordinary. That's why you get more boosts with them than with anyone else. Every day they power out the odds on hundreds of bets to give you a chance to win more. Bet365 boosts specific markets and your winnings. Bet365 boosts specific markets, your winnings, and even parlays. And they don't stop there. Keep an eye out for their biggest and best odds with the incredible Super Boost. Check out the boost and see why it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 or older and present in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, North Carolina, New Jersey, Ohio, Virginia, or 18 and older in Kentucky. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. Terms, conditions, restrictions apply. Also, don't forget, we have launched our popular college sports betting brands BBOC own YouTube channel. Go check it out. You're going to get early access to BBOC coverage like our college football conference betting previews, plus live shows and exclusive content. Subscribe now by clicking the link in the episode description. All right. let's do
Well,
a little
before we
table
start,
setting.
Chad,
Yeah, bud.
you do need to go see a doctor. You're getting me worried because you've had more mistakes than just the
I don't
past
know
two
what's,
episodes you've had in 3 years.
dude.
It's making me nervous.
I don't know if like I'm talking too fast
You're
or
fired up. I
it's
think you're just
new
fired up.
language. Like I'm distracted by Field, who's so incredibly handsome. Like
And that's what
it's
I want to do a really quick Field story. Fields,
Oh, good.
I'm an OG Fantasy Focus fan. So if you don't know the show, Field Yates is an amazing show with our guy Dop over at ESPN. They crush it every week talking fantasy football. And when he came on, I mean, this is years ago, there was a guy named Nate Ravitz, who's a weasel, and it was Matthew Berry. And again, I wasn't the biggest fantasy football guy. Back in the day, I was all about baseball. And you wouldn't believe this. Matthew Berry, that's what his specialty used to be. Like he was the talented Mr. Rhodey. He was amazing at baseball. And the worst days of my life was when Field Yates came on and had replaced Nate Ravitz. And little did I know, I'd eventually love this Field Yates just because he came. I think me and Field are around the same age. And just like being a fantasy focus fan, I was just like, they took away my weasel. They took away my weasel for this handsome man with an amazing smile named Field Yates. And I'll tell you, when I finally broke and really started really liking you, Fields, ESPN did a weird thing where they hypnotized all you guys. Do you remember this when they hypnotized you?
Of course I do. Yeah, of course.
Dude, that was my favorite experience of my life when they hypnotized you. And not like that you were a robot when they hypnotized you, but it was hilarious. You were so into it that you were literally full on hypnotized. And I would love to hear your experience on what happened when you got hypnotized. You remember that? And you come out and people were like, dude, what just happened to you on TV?
Yeah, so a couple of things here. First of all, Nate has nobody to blame but himself. Nate Ravitz is just he just keeps promoting himself, right? Nate, who's like
he's a weasel,
influential figure. Yes, he's a big boss now. He doesn't have time to waste an hour of his day talking about fantasy football with peons like myself and Daniel Dobbs, Spania Bell, and Mike Clay as well. He's now this bigwig. Like I send Nate an email, and I'm fortunate if he writes me back. He's got so many more important people in his life. That's a joke. Nate is very responsive, but yeah, I mean, it was actually like a little daunting stepping into that seat at the beginning.
How old were you? Were you like 25, 26?
It was probably, because this is probably like 8 or 9, maybe 10 seasons now.
Dude, I would have been so nervous. Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, it's also just like they have this. Here's what I told people is that that first season, I said, if the show does anything other than grow, it's my fault, right? Because nothing had changed except for me, right? So I remember thinking, I actually, at the time, ESPN, I was living in Massachusetts, and ESPN said, you don't actually have to come down here and do the show. Like, we're totally comfortable with you doing it remote. And I said to them, you know what? I don't feel comfortable doing it remote. This is pre-pandemic. We're like doing something remote was like a far different experience than where it is now. I went and moved in. How about this for a life experience? I went and moved in with friends of mine who were engaged and going through the wedding planning process. This was well before I was dating my now wife or anywhere close to being engaged myself. So like I'm sitting there consulting on like, table settings and, first dance songs, like all kinds of stuff that I wouldn't be bothered with again for like a decade. But yeah, that first season was a little bit daunting in that regard. And then to sort of just fast forward, I think it was probably 3 or 4 years later to that hypnotist that experience. We do the fantasy football marathon every year. We've got one coming around the corner here, August 19th and 20th on ESPN. And a producer who was doing one of the shows, because the marathon, obviously being 24 plus hours, is going to require lots of different hands on deck. He's like, hey, my cousin is a hypnotist down in like Southern Connecticut. Would anybody here be game to do it? And I was like, first of all, I was at the point of my career, which I don't ever want to leave entirely, but everything they threw my way, yes. So I agreed to do it, of course. And then I would say this, it's not just that it's somebody who I haven't met before, but also somebody who I haven't met before that's related to a friend of mine and a colleague of mine. I wanted to make sure that I bought into the experience. I wasn't going to go up there and say,
you were by far the most bought in of the group.
Yeah, you got to buy, and so there are probably some things that I would try and value, like being hypnotized for again in a future life. Like I've heard of friends that have snapped bad habits by being hypnotized. So I have yet to try that. But if I do encounter one, or if I persist with one that I currently have, a hypnotist available for hire, please reach out to me because I might be the right client for you.
So it's funny, Simon, you don't even know this. And Matt Mitchell doesn't know this. You just mentioned Daniel Dopp. who
Yeah.
obviously is a regular on the show and has gone on to a great career at ESPN and is on air. Daniel Dopp was the original producer of my gambling podcast on ESPN.
How about that?
Yeah.
And when I left ESPN, and he would come on the show, when I left ESPN to start Action Network, I offered Daniel Dopp the job to be lead audio producer at the Action Network. Matt Mitchell was not a part of the conversation yet. I didn't even, he wasn't like he was still in school. He was getting his graduate degree. Dopp was going to come. ESPN offered him a new deal to be on air and do some of the producing that he was doing, and eventually transition to being on air full time. And so that was too good of a deal for him. He took it. I love Dopp. We stay in touch. He's amazing. He's got a great career going. He's awesome.
And he was just, at the time, he was different than what was in the fantasy space. I thought that's why it was like,
for sure,
he was amazing.
Smart move by ESPN putting him in that spot.
Totally smart. Number one. Number two, I know you guys are shitting on Nate, and he played a great role on the show.
Yeah, I love Nate.
Also a good friend.
Nate's
He's
a
also
legend.
just a good friend of mine. People should know, like, he's actually a good guy in real life.
He's the best.
But he had a great role on the show.
Yeah.
Would not surprise me at all if he big timed Field. Just
Well, the irony of all irony is that Nate was one of the very first people, and I'm going to use, I guess, a somewhat odd term, invest in me. Like when I got to ESPN, I was doing just basically, I was freelancing for them. I was in Massachusetts. I was helping them with some Patriots content. And Nate, this really successful person who has gone on to even more success, was like, I think there might be something for you. But candidly, we need you to do stuff beyond, like Mike Reese, who still covers the Patriots at the highest of levels for ESPN, was like, Mike's good on his own, right? Like, we don't need you in that capacity. We need you elsewhere. So he was he was the early adopter of me. So I love Nate. We get along great. We see each other often on campus. And if he hears this, hopefully, he continues to further rise up the ranks and feel further and further away from the fantasy focus universe.
Let me tell you something.
And all the people that still yearn for the days of Nate Rabbits the Weasel.
We'll keep the stuff about Dopp. We are 100% cutting the stuff about him. He deserves no flowers. All right, here's how we're going to do this. We're going to preview the NFC North today. For those listening, reminder, I will focus on three very specific stats or components of each team, because you should know that when bettors think about these things and think about these teams, they are oftentimes looking at success at the line of scrimmage, offensive line, defensive line. So to me, the most important stats to think about, the rankings for these two teams, because that is the heartbeat and the foundation of how these teams are going to succeed or not succeed this year, which led to a lot of different conclusions than I think I would have otherwise had if I was eyeballing this. First team up. And a reminder, every single year for 19 of the past 21 years, 91% of the years, an NFL team has gone from worst to first in its division.
Mm-hmm.
In the NFC North, last year, the Lions won the division. Last place. The Bears.
Who could it be?
The Bears. Lions.
Surprise. Yep.
Lions right now, their odds to win the Super Bowl 12-1, win the division plus 150. And their season win total is at 10.5. Their strength of schedule, Field, I'll come to you after this, 12th hardest. Their O-line ranking, number one by a mile. This is according to Pro Football Focus. Penei Sewell, number one rated offensive lineman overall. Frank Ragnow, number one rated center. They lost Jonah Jackson, but actually improved by signing the guy from the Ravens.
Kevin Zeitler, yeah.
Kevin Zeitler, right? So they got better on the offensive line, and their D-line ranking is fourth because Aiden Hutchinson is elite, graded out a top 6 pass rusher. His 101 QB pressures, second to Micah Parsons last year. They added DJ Reader, who was a bull for the Bengals. To me, and we talked about this last year, Simon, Aleem McNeil, who now is in the news because he got in that fight with Daniel Jones at practice this week. 7th best interior defender, and he was a problem. Like when they didn't have him last year, they were not the same team. Sure. I really wanted to bet on the Lions regressing. I got back to basics, looked at their offensive defensive line, and thought, maybe not. field.
What was the number again for the Lions?
10.5 is their season win
10.5.
total.
Yeah, I like the over there. But it's going to sound incongruent to some of the thoughts that I have about the division as a whole. Part of what impressed me for the Lions last season is that very quickly, after week one specifically, remember they go to Kansas City, beat the Chiefs. There was no Travis Kelce in that game, but it was still a convincing win by the Lions on the road against the defending champs. And they quickly went from being the hunter to the hunted, right? Like that stamped them as a legitimate contender after 1 week. They ended up losing week 2 in this crazy overtime game to the Seahawks, and then they go on and have this great season. This team, I don't think, is concerned by expectations, which is something that there are other teams that have quickly risen up the ranks that I think they're going to have to deal with. And there are some that I'm very confident in, like the Houston Texans. We'll see how they handle all the pressure. I think it'll go pretty well. But there are also cases of teams who all of a sudden you have a different level of expectation, and it ends up manifesting itself in more losses than it does more dominant wins. But the Lions, so good offensively. What's amazing about Detroit offensively is that after Amon-Ra St. Brown, is there a wide receiver that scares you on this offense, at least based off what he has accomplished at this point in his career? I would argue not really. Jamison Williams could certainly get there. He was the 12th pick in the draft just a couple of years ago, but between his gambling suspension, being hurt, coming into the NFL, and just a relatively modest role, has not yet established himself in that way. So it's not like the Lions have lost something this offseason that's going to be really difficult for them to replace. I think they probably top to bottom are a better roster. The division, I think, is better as well this year compared to where it was last year, but I'm still optimistic on the Lions.
Simon.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, both you guys. It feels like we like to be different, but this is not the time to be different here. This is boring. We talked about it months ago that I had them as my third highest graded team on my system. So people really don't understand why. And I think Chad just broke it down pretty simple there. They have one of the best offensive lines in all of football, one of the best defensive lines of football, and they throw in the fact they're bringing back Ben Johnson, who I think is one of the best minds in all of football. It's just, it's all there. The continuity on offense, it's so important where so many teams are switching coordinators constantly where it's like, no, this is more comfortable than golf has ever been in his career. It's more comfortable than he ever was with McVay. He believes in himself. He's confident in himself. He's making checks at the offensive line. And when you go through and break down their film last year, the thing I love so much about their offensive coordinator is the fact that he can see what we all see, which is, Amon St. Brown's one of their best players, so they're going to force feed him when they need to. He quickly adjusted when he realized Sam Laporta is just as important. And he designed so many plays. And if you go through and break it down, a lot of the plays he stole was from Kansas City. And it's like, he's not trying to reinvent the wheel. He just realized, oh, we have a unicorn here, and I can just take these plays that have worked for years with Travis Kelce and, kind of fit that into our offense here. And it really did work. And that's the thing here with this team. It's like, Field just said it, the over 10.5, I'll take it. Like, it's minus 130, so it's got a little bit of juice to it, but I have no mind paying that. Them as their favorite in this division, they should be. Like, them, the fact they're not minus 110, to me, that means there's value there. They're plus 150. I'll take that value just because people do believe in a team. We're going to talk about a little bit Green Bay. So I am getting a plus number just because Green Bay is the anchor in this division right now. They're the new sexy fun team. So to me, I'm getting a free points here, a free, nice bet here on this Lions team that should be closer to 11.5. And I think they've adjusted too much. Where Green Bay, they actually played the Lions really well last year. Like, if you go back and watch that Thanksgiving game, that's what I think, Barnwell talked about it. This Lions team, as great as they were perceived last year, Barnwell said it, they had won a lot of coin flip games. Like, they had games where, if it wasn't going right, they could get blown out. I think they made those fixes to their defense, Chad. They really did try to attack the secondary, just like the Eagles did, right? They couldn't stop anyone throwing in the middle of the field, just like the Eagles couldn't last year. I think Detroit knew that, and that's the position they tried to attack. So I'm going to get benefit of the doubt to a team that kept all their coaches, and their offense is only going to get better because the two rookies they drafted last year, in Gibbs and Laporta, they're only going to be better this year. So to me, all arrows points up to this Detroit team that this is the year. If they don't win it this year, Ben Johnson ain't going to be there next year. I really do believe he'll move on. This has got to be the year for Detroit to finally break through, at least to make it to the NFC Championship game and then maybe a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I was surprised when I was doing the research here how much I ended up liking the Lions. Because, Simon, we've been talking about the Packers, and we're going to get to them next. We've been talking about the Packers as the team that we thought there might be more value on. And then I see how dominant the Lions are in the places that matter the most, offensively and defensively, in the line of scrimmage. And the Lions are at plus 150. Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, of course we're going to bet the Lions at plus 150. They should be closer to plus 100 minus 110, like you said. So that's number one. Number two, Jared Goff. Don't forget. And Field, I want your take on Goff as a quarterback and where you sort of see him within the entire context of the NFL, because you are thinking about this nonstop from a QB perspective. But Jared Goff is just straight baller against the spread. The most profitable quarterback against the spread in week one over the past 20 years. Jared Goff, 7-0 against the spread in openers. Jared Goff indoors, 35-17 against the spread, 25-9 the past three seasons, 36-35-2 against the spread outdoors. For what it's worth, the Lions have 13 indoor games this year, plus a game in Dallas, in which, depending on the weather in the fall, could be indoors. Field, we're going to have to talk about Jordan Love, but give me a Jared Goff take.
Yeah, and by the way, those outdoor games include an early November game in Green Bay. It could be cold, but it's not going to be most likely frigid. And then a late December game in San Francisco, which, while they play on grass, December in San Francisco, as you guys know, can be a fairly moderate climate. Goff is so exceptional within the confines of what Detroit has asked him to do. Jared Goff, I don't lose too much sleep over like debating which quarterback is 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. I tend to look at quarterbacks in tiers, buckets. There's the very elite tier. Maybe it's a one-man tier with Patrick Mahomes, and then that second tier of elite signal callers. There's an eventual tier, whether it's tier 2, 3, 4, somewhere in that range, that I would say represents players that are above the quarterback Mendoza line. I think Jared Goff is appropriately above that quarterback Mendoza line, which is that I don't think Jared Goff is going to be the player that's going to single-handedly carry a team towards a deep playoff run. But I do think Jared Goff, with the right pieces around him, can operate a system at a high level, and that's exactly what Detroit has done with the pieces they have placed around him, that great offensive line that Chad referenced, and this pretty intriguing offensive system run by Ben Johnson. So the contract this offseason was no surprise to me. I think it was a totally reasonable measure for Detroit to take, and I am a generally pro Jared Goff guy.
The Lions, the past 3 years, the best ATS record since the Patriots in 2016. In fact, they are 1, 2, 3, top 7 in the past 20 years. Patriots in 2003 to 2005, 71%. Yep. Chargers, 2004 to 2006, 69%. Patriots, 69%, 16 to 18. Minnesota, 69%, 69%, 2015, 2016. Carolina, 67%, 94 to 96. And then the Detroit Lions. So a really good team the past 3 years. And if I would say bet regression at your own peril, because they are good enough in the areas that you need to be good to continue to maintain success. They are not just an edge talent player team. Green Bay, 19-1 to win the Super Bowl, plus 210 to win the division, over 9.5, 14th hardest schedule, offensive line ranking, also middle of the road, 14th, defensive line ranking, 11th. I do think there's potential with this defensive line. Like, Rashawn Gary is great, had his injuries issues, so we don't know. That could be a higher number based on one dominant player. Devontae Wyatt, Carl Brooks have potential. Honestly, I think the biggest difference for this defense, Simon, is Jeff Hafley, who quit as the head coach at Boston College, saw college sports was going, said, I am out of here, changing the defense from 3-4 under Joe Barry the past 3 seasons to a 4-3. This will be a much better defense. I don't know that the preseason rankings reflect the potential of this defense.
Yeah, it's the same old tune though, Chad. We've been hearing this since Brett Favre's days. I mean, every year you hear that, look at all the ones and twos they have on defense, all the first round, second round picks they have on their defense. And every year they go, well, it must be the coordinator. We'll bring in a new guy every couple of years. And it's just never really panned out, right? I mean, I still can't believe they only have one ring to show for those Aaron Rodgers years. I mean, it really is mind blowing when you think of the talent level. It's
I
like,
blame McCarthy. I think I
that's
honestly
fair.
feel, I think it's,
I
I
blame
also think
Brady
it,
and Mahomes, and I'll explain that in a second.
right, but it's also, right. It's also Aaron Rodgers. Like, he might've been too arrogant to acquiesce to some of the things that needed to be done. I don't want to go on a tangent. I want to talk about
Yeah.
this team. 9.5 is the win total, plus 210 is the division.
But there was just kryptonite to it. Like that, one of our stupidest bets we've ever won in our lives, Chad, was we had the 49ers at a plus number against Aaron Rodgers, and we won it on a blocked punt in like the fourth quarter, in which a game that Green Bay's defense dominated the 49ers offense. Fast forward to, I think it was 2 years later, the 49ers ran for like 300 yards against that Green Bay's defense, right, in the playoffs. It's like it just never synced up with that Green Bay team. When their offense had it, their defense had it, vice versa. But the most interesting conversation about this team this year is the fact that professionals are so split. Like I'm talking guys that are betting down, six figures, big money right now on this Green Bay team because they do believe in Jordan Love and what they saw. And I'm just having a really hard time getting there, Chad, because I want to believe, because the film is unbelievable, but it is the smallest of small samples. And it was so perfect. I mean, he was flawless. Pressure in his face. He moved without even thinking about it outside the pocket, throwing 50-yard bombs right down the seam to guys right in stride. It was like, who is this man? Like, I mean, again, we had an offensive tackle who played with him in practice for years, and he said, we never saw that in practice. And he came on our podcast, talked about it, and it's just like, okay, if Bakhtiari is saying he never saw that in practice, they didn't know, right? That they had to restructure his deal for that fifth-year option, because even the team was like, we really don't know what Jordan Love is. They quickly realized this dude's a gamer. And I think LaFleur realized that as well, because he really opened up the playbook the second half of the year, and that's when it all started working out. So that's why, like, I want to be, hard on here, being like, you have to fade this team, regression, which I think most common people think that way. But the tools are all there. They have this incredible young group of wide receivers that we all just love, especially in the fantasy football community. It's like you could debate for hours who you think is going to be the number one receiver on this team. Like, everyone has their own opinion. At the end of the day, I said it last year, and I took a lot of shit from Green Bay fans about it. Jordan Love, for them to make the playoffs, I said it, he had to be a Pro Bowler. And I said, I couldn't bet on him being a Pro Bowler. Little did I know he was going to be a Pro Bowler, and they were going to sneak in that last seed. And it was like, he had to play perfect. Again, 18 touchdowns, 1 interception to end the season. Like, we had never seen anything like that with a guy who's making his first full year as a starter. So I get where people are at on this. My position has not changed, though, Chad. As much as I want to talk myself into taking their over, I just can't do it. I've taken their under, especially now it's at plus 150, plus 140 at a lot of books. The under at minus 9.5. I think they're right there. 9 wins in this division. Again, the Bears are not going to be a walkover 2-0 win for this Green Bay team. I think they split it. And I do have the Lions as well, giving them a better game than they did in Thanksgiving. So my view of it is just Green Bay, they had a really benefit of the schedule down the stretch last year. This year, we already talked about it. Their schedule is much harder. I can't go with the public here. I can't take this over, but I see why people are doing it, just because it's all there. Like, the pieces, the coaching, it's all there for them to be great this year. It's just, I need to see it more from Jordan Love, and then I'll put my money behind it. But for right now, I'm happy to be the contrarian here and take their under.
It was Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers, and Matt LaFleur looked brilliant because Aaron Rodgers was brilliant. And then I think in Aaron Rodgers' last couple years, he did things that Matt LaFleur told him to do, and he played better than he had in sort of earlier years, right? Because he was on a downward trend. Last year was the first year in which Matt LaFleur was proving what a good coach he is, no matter who's on the field. And we were blown away by what he did with Jordan Love. Since getting the job, he's 53-37 against the spread, second most profitable coach against the spread, behind just Dan Campbell of the Lions. He is an underdog in the Packers' first game in Brazil. Matt LaFleur's Packers have been underdogs 32 times. He's covered 22 of those by an average of 4 points a game. In the first 3 weeks of the regular season, before anyone is able to make adjustments, Matt LaFleur, 13-2 against the spread. So we do like Matt LaFleur. And also think about this. After they open against the Eagles in Brazil, Colts at home, Titans on the road, Vikings at home, Cardinals at home. This team is going to get off to a very hot start, which makes me think, Simon, if the Lions falter a little bit, it's going to be time to buy back into the Lions even more.
I like that.
There you go. All right, guys.
All right.
Chicago Bears.
We're still live. Just as for those out there watching us live, we just wanted to acknowledge you and thank you for
thank you for
making
watching.
it through that very clumsy
thank you
frozen screenshot.
Listen, we're doing video in the digital video era. This is what's going to happen.
Of course. Fairness to Fields, I didn't even know we were live either. Thank God I didn't make a bad joke that I thought members were cut because I had no idea either.
Man, I love it.
Which means all that stuff about Nate Ravitz ends up staying in, at least for this podcast.
Unfortunately,
yeah.
Chicago Bears, 35-1 to win the Super Bowl, plus 265 to win the division. Season win total is 8.5. Strength of schedule, again, strength of schedule is based on projections of season win totals by odds makers. Chicago in the upcoming season, Chicago has the third easiest schedule, which is going to make their collapse all the more painful for Chicago Bears fans. O-line rank, according to Pro Football Focus, 11th. Tevin Jenkins at guard has become an anchor on this offensive line. I would not have expected that after he had a very slow start to his career. Top five guard in the latter half of the season. This team generally was great. Darnell Wright, first round pick. Everyone was like, what? Last year, he turned out great. I think he's headed in the right direction. Their blocking efficiency in the last half of the year was top 10 in the NFL, top half of the NFL, I mean. Problem is the defensive line. Montez Sweat, they're 27th ranked. Montez Sweat was great when he joined midway through the year, completely changed the defense, made them much better front to back.
He did.
The Bears had to get better in so many spots. They needed an edge rusher. They needed to help the offensive line. They needed to get the quarterback. They needed to get the quarterback a receiver. They did the right things to me by improving the offensive line, drafting Rome Odunze. You got to give him what he needs because the window is so short. That D-line is going to be a problem. And then there's history, which we're going to talk about. But first, Field, burst my bubble on the Bears.
I think there are ways that we can maybe speak out of both sides of our mouth as it pertains to the Chicago Bears. This team's going to improve, I think, by quite a bit. And while Caleb Williams is getting a ton of hype, I think sometimes we are even ignoring what the potential extreme is here for Caleb Williams, which is to be CJ Stroud and be a quarterback that butts into the top 5, 6, 7 in the entire NFL right away. Stroud did that last year, obviously. That's possible for Caleb Williams. Extremely bullish on the player coming out of USC. To me, the clear-cut number one quarterback prospect, number one overall prospect in this past year's draft was Caleb Williams. I also am going to be hesitant in just making the positive case for all 4 teams in the division. And I've already done so with 2 teams, which means that you can't totally be all in on 4. So I think the Bears take some steps forward. I also think that this is a team that might come up just a hair shy of the playoffs, which in the NFC, I think could be a little easier than the AFC to get to. But I think a step forward for the Bears to 8 or 9 wins is very much in play without it also including a trip to the postseason. And that's where I'm at. Is that reasonable or no? Are you mad at me? Are we okay?
No. It's totally reasonable. And look, I'm already game planning my Thursday night on August, this Thursday when the Bears Hard Knocks premieres at 9
Is that
p.m.
Thursday?
Thursday night.
I was thinking it was tonight. Yeah.
I'm planning a freaking party. But I'm looking down at my phone right now because I want to find the latest odds for MVP and look for Caleb Williams, who right now is 50-1 to win MVP. Okay. These would be the shortest odds for any rookie in the last 15 years. Let me give you some of the names on this list, and you will say to yourself, oh my God, this guy is screwed, right? Trey Lance was 100-1, 21. Joe Burrow, 100-1. Okay. Tua, 100-1. Herbert 100 to 1. It's going to get ugly after this. Leonard Fournette 100 to 1. Kyler Murray was 80 to 1. Mac Jones was 80 to 1. Melvin Gordon in 2015 was 75 to 1. The Bears are minus 110 to make the playoffs. In the last 15 years, Chicago has had minus odds to make the playoffs 3 times and missed all 3 times. Simon, I could go on.
Self-inflicted pain, Simon.
I could go on, but we got to walk away from this Bears team.
Yeah, I'm the Grim Reaper when it comes to this Bears team and the hype. And we had on a guy from Chicago, a radio host, and he was
Danny Parkins.
Yeah, he's my favorite classic Chicago guy where he's just blind to the truth. I feel like I stabbed him hard. I told him the joke of Chicago is that's where QBs go to die. And he was just like, that's not true. And the weather, and it's like, the weather excuse doesn't work when Green Bay, Cleveland, and Buffalo have all had guys that threw over 4,000 yards. It's just, they've never had a guy like Williams. And Williams is the breaker of all these streaks they've had. Like, he is the guy that we expect that will change the history books for Chicago. If he would have came out after his freshman year at Oklahoma, he would have been the #1 pick. Like, this kid has just been waiting for that day to be the #1 pick. His whole life, I mean, you talk about in high school, his dad was prepping him to be the #1 pick, prepping him with media training. It's like, it's just next level. We can't even fathom it because it's just such a different world than we have ever even experienced. So Williams has so much pressure on him. It doesn't work like that in football. It's all about the guys you don't see coming that work out, right? It's the Brock Purdy's, the Ben Roethlisbergers, right? The CJ Stroud. CJ, we thought he'd be all right. Did I think this kid was going to throw whatever it was, 23 touchdowns and 5 picks? No, my brain can't wrap my head. I can't wrap my head around it. It's like, we never seen a rookie be so smart with the ball. That's what Williams has to be. Like, if Caleb Williams wants to go over 9.5 wins, it's up to 9.5 wins, Chad. Like, that to me is insane at this point. Like, we talked about him getting drafted, it was 7.5. It has now been pushed up to 9.5. Chad just said their Super Bowl odds are 35 to 1. That is the dumbest bet you could ever make in your life, betting them to make it to the Super Bowl.
That's lower than they were, Simon, last year when we loved them with Justin Fields. Like that.
But they're a way better team this year. That's why I understand why people are so upset that Fields didn't get this chance. And it's like, that's not how football works, right? It's like the team is doing the best they can trying to build. I mean, Poles has done an incredible job setting all this up. So I already told you my bet for Chicago, if you want to have fun, my bet is Williams over passing yards. I think that is something attainable. I think when we talked about it, it was at 3,500. I might be up to 3,600, 700 now, just because the hype is just boiling so high now. It's crazy. So to me, I have to bet the under 9.5, but they're not my favorite under team. It's kind of like Green Bay, right? I'm just throwing a little bit on their under. Same with Green Bay. The fourth team we're going to talk about here, that's the team I love for an under. But this division has just gone from, we didn't really know what they were last year, right? It was Kirk Cousins' division. Jared Goff was kind of the shocker. We didn't really know we had in Jordan Love and really know we have with Justin Fields to now. This is a position, this division in a year or two could be just a juggernaut in football, right? If Goff stays what he's doing and Jordan Love keeps ascending and Caleb Williams works out and JJ works out, wow. Like, this is a really tough division with some great coaching. Again, we talked about it. Eberflus is the worst coach in this division, and it's not really close, right? We have the most doubts of him compared to the Vikings, Green Bay, and Detroit. So the hype is too high at this point, right? You just can't do it. It's just not logical to bet this number, especially their over win total. Even though it's at a minus 150, minus 145 right now, the under 9.5 for an under for this team at that price. I'm willing to eat the vig and the juice on that just because, again, it opened at 7.5 and it's gone up 2 games just on hype. So I just have to take that position, Chad.
Field. Caleb Williams, passing yardage. That's a fantasy gold mine. When you think about Caleb Williams as a fantasy quarterback, does it match up with a yardage haul that would go as high as Simon is projecting?
So I have him as quarterback 13 right now. That's where I have Caleb Williams in my quarterback rankings, and it's right outside kind of a tier, which ends with Jaden Daniels, the #2 pick in the draft. But this is fantasy football. This is not real life football, where I don't know about the future of Caleb Williams, at least out of the gates, is how much rushing do we see from Caleb Williams into design nature? They've got so many players around Caleb Williams that the Bears may say, why bother risking our quarterback in any way, shape, or form when we can just hand the ball off to a backfield now led by DeAndre Swift, or throw to what is immediately in competition for the best receiving trio in the NFL. So yeah, the passing total is probably the gateway for Caleb Williams to have a massive fantasy season. So I think I'm buying what Simon is selling right now.
The Bears win total at 9.5.
Yeah.
That would be the third team to have a win total of 9 or more after selecting a QB in the top 5 of the NFL draft. The other teams, 2021 San Francisco 49ers with Trey Lance at 10.5.
Yep.
1992, neither of you fuckers were born yet. New
You were
York
born.
Giants.
92? I was born. Yeah, it was a couple of years in.
You son
5
of a
years in.
bitch.
Yeah.
New York Giants, Dave
Yep.
Brown.
Wow. That's a
Okay.
name.
Cuts right there. That's a deep cut. That is a deep
here's
cut.
another reason. Another reason to fade the Chicago Bears.
Gosh.
It's the highest team over under for a team that's drafted a quarterback first overall in the wild card era since 1980. One team, Chicago Bears. That's it. After that, again, the Giants and Dave Brown, Bryce Young and the Panthers. I think they're a year too early because we know we love the Panthers this year. And then the Rams and Jared Goff. So everything that Caleb Williams is tied to Caleb Williams right now is unprecedented when it comes to team expectations.
It's impossible to live up to. It truly is impossible.
You know, so Chad is just setting himself up. You are just emotionally preparing yourself as what you're doing here. I see it.
By the way, you nailed it. I am just so getting ready so I can be
just in case. Yep.
It's a little bit of an emotional hedge.
Fair enough.
If it goes great.
I mean, if he does get the 10 wins, Chad, you can do a whole episode just going off how great he is. I support it because that to me would be him going 10-7 in that division. That would be truly an incredible feat.
When he goes to 10-7, throws for 4,000 yards and 25 touchdowns, we're just turning this into the Chicago Bears podcast.
Oh, God.
I can guarantee you that a podcast it won't be in the near future, Minnesota Vikings podcast. This team is 80-1 plus 1,000 to win the division, 6.5 in the win total. I think that's being generous because their strength of schedule is 5th hardest. Their O-line rank is 13th. Obviously, Christian Darrisaw just signed a huge contract, 3rd best pass blocking tackle per PFF in 2023. The rest of the line is mediocre. And the D-line rank, if the Bears were like an at 27th, the Vikings are an oh crap at 30th. Daniil Hunter, gone to the Texans. Their best player now, Andrew Van Ginkel, who at 29 just had a career year for the Dolphins and did the smart thing, got a bag off of that 1 year, but he's generally battled injuries through his career. We don't know who the quarterback is yet. Whoever it will be is playing behind an average offensive line and a brutal opening schedule. So, Field, give me something to hang on to for the Vikings if you can.
All right, so Kevin O'Connell is a really, really good head coach who is going
to
be
Kevin
an
O'Connell.
Excellent tutor. Yep, love Kevin O'Connell. He's going to be awesome for whoever is the starting quarterback. Sounds more and more like it's going to be Sam Darnold at the beginning of the season, but it won't last long, as I think eventually J.J. McCarthy is going to take over this job as a rookie. I'm not going to sit here and go full Mike Golick Jr. on you with offensive line talk, but I want to put a little bit more respect on our guy, Brian O'Neill, their right tackle, I think is a good player as well. And maybe if you're looking for something to hang your hat on, it's that this team last year, when Kirk Cousins was out, stayed frisky. I'm generally less optimistic here. Somebody is going to have to finish 4th in this division if I had to cast my die on one team. As of right now, it's Minnesota. I think the coaches on both sides of the ball are very good. I do think there are some enough question marks at key roster spots that I am just a touch concerned about this team.
Where else do you have question marks? Because like, to me, I don't know where you don't have question marks on this team.
Oh, really? Yeah, I mean, the wide receiver room, really, really good. Justin Jefferson by himself makes the wide receiver room good, but Jordan Addison, a first-round pick last year. We'll see whether he faces punishment or not for a recent incident. That frankly, I can't imagine how he put himself in that bad of a spot once again.
DUI, second DUI.
So I think was it speeding last year? Not, no, we don't have to sit here and
Yeah.
and go through it all. But yes, two separate incidents that were not good. Um, Defensively, they kind of they punched above their weight last year because Brian Flores is really good. They found an undrafted gem and Ivan Pace at linebacker. Dallas Turner plus Andrew Van Ginkel plus Jonathan Grenard forms a pretty decent pass rushing trio, if you ask me. The secondary is thin, but maybe because of the chaotic scheme that Brian Flores employs, you don't need to be quite as loaded at cornerback. I've talked to many, many, many defensive coaches over many years who have told me time and again, it is much easier to cover up for a deficient cornerback room with a great rush than it is the inverse, especially with the way that the NFL is officiated these days and how restrictive the rules are for defensive backs. So, yeah, that will be my case for them to be a competitive team this year, more competitive than you might think based off their roster. But I do think this team is 4 out of 4 in this division.
Simon.
Yeah, I'll just stay off the top. This is one of the teams I'm taking my larger positions on to be one of the worst teams in football. And it stinks because I do love their coaching so much, but Chad just nailed it. If you're not driving, open up your phone real quick and go and look at their schedule. Their first game against the Giants is definitely winnable, but the next 8 are brutal. Like it's a brutal opening slate for them. With
boy,
let me read. I'll read it to everybody. Right? They got the Giants, and look, we like the Giants.
I love the Giants there,
Simon.
Yeah.
You and I have bet the Giants already. It's going to be one of the 5 picks that we love. Then they have the Niners, Texans, Packers, Jets, Lions, Rams. If you listen to the Action Network podcast with Stuckey and Raybon, they did their AFC, NFC previews in May. Stuckey had a great bet. Is there a team that might be better to bet on to be the last winless team than the Minnesota Vikings? Like they could be 0-8.
And the only reason I haven't made that bet is just because I have so much invested in that week 1 that if I can't take double L's on that. If they beat the Giants, that would kill me. But you nailed it, Chad. Where it's just even if they somehow improve a little bit on defense, last year was so far above it, and it's just I just can't see it. They don't have the pieces to me. It's a team that's in a total rebuild, and again we talk all the time about this where it's like coaching can really steal you a couple wins. I mean, Brian Daboll won a couple games with his third string quarterback against, pretty good teams last year. It's like these coaches, even here, they had the Pasternaut winning games for them a couple games. So, we know these things can happen. So again, wouldn't be shocked if they do somehow get the 4 wins. 6.5 wins is what the books are hanging it at right now. So this is the under I've just been hitting heavy. And I know selfishly, I didn't want to talk about it too much because I wanted to keep getting a ton of value on it so I could bet it all summer. I'm tapped out. I don't need to put any more into this. It's like I am so fat on betting this game's under. It's like I can't bet anymore. So if you want to go out and bet them worst record, still plus, I think it was 12-1 or 13-1 in most books. It's come down to 11-1 a couple, so shop around. But and again, I don't want to bring up the sports book. There is one sports book that don't bet any NFL futures on them because they're going to tax you extra after January. So make sure you're with a book that's not going to crush your futures after January. Because again, the season runs until after January now, people. That's how long the season is. So this Vikings team to me, it's a classic case of they knew what they're going to be and they let Kirk walk, right? They could have brought Kirk back to do another 9-8, 10-7 kind of season, right? This, like Field said, they have some of the best receivers in football. Like they have the pieces here to make it all work. Even TJ is coming back off a big injury. I still think he'll be a solid player for them. Yeah. Defensive wise, though, they're going to be terrible. And now you bring in the fact that I just talked about Jordan Love being the ultimate gamer. Sam Darnold is whatever the opposite of that is. This is the guy who, in practice, he is number 3 overall, can't miss, throwing dimes in corner pocket. Sam Darnold. Once the game starts, ghost. We talked about it. He might be starting his first game back into that stadium that, he has PTSD going back to MetLife. Like that's where it all went wrong for him. So to me, they're in a spot where it's like, I don't know why they wouldn't just start JJ. Even if he's going to be rough out the gate, who cares? Like, who cares if it's rough out the gate? You're literally just trying to get this guy reps and get him experience because he didn't have the reps in college. Like he just was not passing as much as you needed him to throw. So to me, he's my most exciting prospect. I mean, you talked about it before during the draft, Chad. This is a kid that won in high school and then he won in college. and he was always the guy, right? He was always number 1 ranked, number 2 ranked kid coming out of high school, always was this big known player in Michigan. He lived up to all those expectations. So to me, Minnesota, I'm taking a giant dump on your chest right now, and I'm so sorry about it. I'm just shitting on you guys, and I hate your team this year. The future is so bright if he does stay with this coaching staff, and they do keep putting the pieces around him. But man, is this season gonna suck? Like you guys, Chad just said it. You could easily be 0-9, and it's like you wouldn't be shocked. That's a juggernaut start to the season for either Sam Darnold or JJ. It's just brutal how the schedule makers laid it out. So I'm sorry, Minnesota, but they got to be one of my favorite unders this season, Chad.
Never allowed back in the Twin Cities again.
Field, you talk to a lot of guys, and you mentioned Kevin O'Connell, and I love Kevin O'Connell. I agree with you. I think love him. I think he's a great coach, and I felt like, Brian Daboll and him started the same time, and I felt like Brian Daboll got too much credit for being a great coach that first year with the Giants, and I don't think Kevin O'Connell got enough credit last year.
Well, he did beat him on the road with Daniel Jones.
They went head to head in the playoffs.
I'm not
right?
saying. I'm not saying Brian Daboll didn't deserve the credit and that Kevin O'Connell didn't deserve the blame for those games. I'm saying last year, what Kevin O'Connell did after Kirk Cousins went out, after Justin Jefferson went out with a really porous defense that Brian Flores was doing as good as he could with, he still put that team in a lot of great spots where they had a path to the playoffs. Starting guys like off the street. When you look at Kevin O'Connell, you mentioned he's a good coach. What do you like about him? What do you like about what he does with quarterbacks? What do you hear from other people you talk to in the league?
Yeah, so Kevin O'Connell is an excellent making the quarterback decisions easy coach for him, right? I'm not saying that there aren't complex nuances to the offense. There certainly are, but he allows things to slow down for quarterbacks. He also allows them to not have to worry about factors that are out of their control. If they have porous offensive line play, if the receivers are hurt, he can find ways to help make the scheme easier. His demeanor is really good as well. I think we are more and more in a generation or an era, whatever you want to call it, of tough love coaching not being the norm anymore, right? In part, I think you can trace that to the roots of college football, where these guys are now getting paid. And if you have a coach that's dropping the hammer on a kid, he can say, I'm going to take my millions upon millions of dollars from NIL money and go somewhere else because I have an opportunity to go somewhere where they might treat you like royalty, even if I'm in a bit of a funk. So Kevin O'Connell is a very high relatability level. Maybe it's because he played in the NFL as a quarterback, even if it was briefly. Really smart guy, somebody who seems to have the capacity to ride the wave a little bit as well. Things haven't always been easy for the Vikings. We saw that last year when Kirk Cousins was hurt. They still found a way to kind of keep that outlook, and they ended up proving it, right? Like they were hanging tougher than many of us expected down the stretch last season, which not only excluded Kirk Cousins, but of course did not include Justin Jefferson for a huge stretch of games.
A couple weeks ago, I think it was last week actually, Simon was in Connecticut and he came by my house and we had lunch together in the kitchen with my wife. He met my younger son. And when he and I were having lunch with my wife, he was talking about betting and, she was surprised to learn that I had a podcast and that somebody else was on it with me. And we were talking about betting, and the way he talked about betting with the confidence he talked about it that night, Stacy looked at me and she says, how are we not giving this guy all of our money? I feel like no matter what we give him, we would come out better in the end.
Gajillionaires,
Gajillionaires. She was so taken and enamored by his confidence and his story and his humanity, and he's so personable. She loved it. So I think all of us, we should just pull our money and just give it to Simon.
There you go, Simon.
Tell her Vikings under 6.5, Chad.
Well, that's what I'm going to say. What we're going to do with that money, to recap, we're going to put it all in the Lions plus 150. We're going to put it in the Lions over 10.5, and we are going to go to town. This is the strongest take you've had of the previews we've done so far, the AFC and NFC South, and now the NFC North. Vikings under 6.5. Simon loves it. I love it. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Do you have an opinion on Vikings under 6.5?
I do. I continue to feel as though this is a team that might be 4 of 4 here. So I think we largely agree on our assessment of where things are going to shake out. I feel even stronger about how I view the Vikings after and I didn't realize this previously, how difficult their schedule is out of the chutes. That is very tough pre-bye, and even those 3 weeks after the bye as well.
Would you still take Justin Jefferson in the first round, knowing all what you know now, or you wouldn't bump him down a little bit?
Nah, he's fine by me. He's generational in terms of talent or close to it, and quarterback play didn't really defy him last year, right? I mean, he came back and was playing with Jaron Hall and Nick Mullins and a smorgasbord of quarterbacks, and absolutely balled out when he was healthy after that hamstring strain for whatever it was, 8 or 9 games that he missed, which stunk, obviously.
As a reminder, the Favorites podcast is presented by Bet365. Bet365 doesn't do ordinary. That's why you get more boost with them than with anyone else. Every day they power up the odds on hundreds of bets to give you a chance to win more. Bet365 boosts specific markets, your winnings, and even parlays. And they don't stop there. Keep an eye out for their biggest and best odds with the incredible Super Boost. Check out the boost and see why it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 or older and present in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, North Carolina, New Jersey, Ohio, Virginia, or 18 and older in Kentucky. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. Terms, conditions, restrictions apply. Simon and I are back with our next episode of The Favorites on the Action Network YouTube page Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern, to talk AFC North with special guest Warren Sharp. Download us from Spotify, Apple Pods, wherever you get your pods. Rate, review, subscribe, leave us 5 stars, say whatever you want. Feedback is a gift. Until next time, love you.